The history of fast food is not merely a chronicle of dietary shifts, it is the definitive story of the 20th century's obsession with efficiency, standardization, and scale. It is a narrative that begins in the unsanitary chaos of the early industrial age, moves through the gleaming optimism of post-war Americana, and arrives at the algorithmic precision of the digital era. It is a story populated by eccentric visionaries, ruthless corporate architects, and accidental revolutionaries who transformed the most intimate of human activities into a global assembly line. We explore how local hamburger stands evolved into geopolitical forces, how fair food became a staple of the global diet, and how the drive for speed reshaped our landscapes, our labor markets, and our waistlines. To understand the rise of the hamburger, one must first understand the terror that surrounded it at the turn of the 20th century. In 1906, Upton Sinclair published The Jungle, a harrowing exposé of the Chicago meatpacking industry. Sinclair intended to highlight the plight of immigrant workers, but the public fixated on his descriptions of the meat itself: diseased cattle, rats swept into sausage hoppers, and the general filth of the slaughterhouse. The reaction was visceral. Ground beef, the primary component of the hamburger, became synonymous with danger. It was viewed as mystery meat. The scraps and offal that couldn't be sold as Kutsen was largely relegated to county fairs and carnivals. It was fair food, eaten only when hygiene was a secondary concern to spectacle. In this climate, the hamburger was an outlaw food. It was sold from rickety pushcarts or dimly lit lunch wagons, often associated with vice and poverty. The challenge for any aspiring entrepreneur was not just to make a better burger, but to convince a traumatized public that eating one wouldn't kill them. The White Knight of Wichita. The rehabilitation of the hamburger began in Wichita, Kansas in 1921. With the partnership of Walter Anderson and Edgar Waldo, Billy Ingram, their collaboration was the first instance of a dynamic that would repeat throughout fast food history, the pairing of a relentless operational genius. Anderson had been operating hamburger stands since 1916 and had developed a cooking method that would become the industry standard. He understood that the uneven cooking of a thick meatball was a safety risk and a culinary flaw. Anderson's innovation was to smash the meatball onto the griddle, creating a flat, uniform patty that cooked through instantly. He added shredded onions to the grill, placing the bun on top of the cooking meat to steam it, trapping the flavor and softening the bread. This method created the slider, a product that was consistent, hot, and safe. However, it was Billy Ingram who understood that the problem wasn't the food, it was the optics. Ingram realized that to sell burgers to the middle class, he had to perform a psychological intervention. He had to build a sanctuary of hygiene. The Porcelain Promise. Ingram and Anderson founded White Castle, widely recognized as the world's first fast food chain. Every element of the brand was a calculated signal of purity. The name White symbolized cleanliness. Castle symbolized permanence and stability, countering the transient nature of the burger cart. The architecture was the primary marketing tool. Inspired by the water tower of the Chicago pumping station, Ingram designed buildings that were small fortresses of hygiene. He utilized white porcelain steel for the exteriors and interiors of material previously reserved for hospitals, dentist offices, and sanitary fixtures. This was the first known use of porcelain steel in building design. When a customer walked into a White Castle, they were entering a sterile environment. The surfaces gleamed. The stainless steel counters were spotless. The employees wore crisp white uniforms and paper hats, manufactured by Ingram's own subsidiary, Pepper Linen. This was the culinary analog to the Industrial Revolution happening in Detroit. Just as Henry Ford was standardizing the automobile, Ingram was standardizing the meal. He established centralized bakeries to ensure every bun was identical. He built meat supply plants to control the quality of the beef from slaughter to service. He drafted a rigorous manual for employee conduct, dictating everything from the cleanliness of their fingernails to the precise motion of the spatula. The strategy worked. By selling these small square burgers by the sack for 5 cents, White Castle demystified the meat. They ran coupons in local newspapers and innovation, at the time encouraging families to buy a sack for the evening meal. They even hired a spokesperson, Julia Joyce, to tour women's clubs and demonstrate how White Castle burgers could be part of a sophisticated family dinner. The root beer roadside. While Ingram was fortifying the burger in the Midwest, A different kind of revolution was brewing in the heat of California's Central Valley. In June 1919, Roy W. Allen set up a roadside stand in Lodi, California, to sell a creamy, effervescent root beer to crowds celebrating the homecoming of World War I veterans. It was a hot night, the drink was ice cold, and the reception was ecstatic. Allen's root beer stand tapped into the nascent car culture of the West. Unlike the urban walk-up model of White Castle, Allen's business was oriented toward the road. In 1922, he partnered with Frank Wright, an employee from his Lodi stand, and they combined their initials to form A&W. A&W pioneered a business model that would eventually supersede the company-owned chain, the franchise. By 1926, Allen and Wright were selling the rights to their name and their syrup recipe to independent operators. This allowed A&W to expand with explosive speed, far outpacing the capital-intensive growth of White Castle. By 1950, there were 450 A&W stands across America. The A&W experience was defined by the frosty mug. Franchisees kept heavy glass mugs in freezers, ensuring that when the root beer was poured, it hit the glass with a thermal shock that created a thick, creamy head. This sensory detailed the weight of the glass. The coldness of the handle created a tactile memory for the consumer that paper cups could never replicate. However, as the automobile became the dominant mode of transport, the service model at these stands evolved into a cultural phenomenon that was as chaotic as it was iconic. Introducing the car hop culture. By the 1940s, the drive-in had become the social hub of American youth culture. The mechanism of service was the car hop waiters, often young women, who would emerge from the restaurant to take orders at the driver's window. Culturally, the car hop was a star, dressed in uniforms that ranged from military-inspired tunics to majorette outfits. Often on roller skates, they were the eye candy that drew teenage boys and hot rod enthusiasts. The drive-in became a theater of flirtation and display. It was where you went to see and be seen, to show off your car, and to hang out. Operationally, however, the car hop model was a disaster. It was the antithesis of fast food. Latency, the process was slow. A car hop had to walk or skate to the car, take the order, return to the kitchen, wait for the food, and return to the car. Inefficiency, orders were frequently mixed up or wrong due to the ad hoc nature of the runner system. Cost, the restaurants had to maintain large inventories of heavy glassware and metal trays, which were frequently stolen or broken. Labor, it required a large staff to service a relatively small number of cars. Demographics, the rowdy atmosphere of the drive-in, fueled by loitering teenagers, often alienated families, the most lucrative demographic. The industry was ripe for disruption. It needed someone to strip away the theater and focus purely on the machine. The San Bernardino Epiphany. In 1940, two brothers from New Hampshire, Richard Dick and Morris Mac McDonald, opened a drive-in barbecue restaurant in San Bernardino, California. It was successful, but like every other drive-in, it was plagued by the inefficiencies of the car hop model. The brothers were obsessed with the numbers. They noticed that 80% of their sales came from hamburgers, yet their menu was cluttered with barbecue items that were labor-intensive and slow to cook. In 1948, the McDonald brothers made a radical decision that baffled their competitors. They closed their profitable restaurant for 3 months. When they reopened, they had fired the car hops, removed the silverware and plates, and slashed the menu to just 9 items: hamburgers, cheeseburgers, soft drinks, milk, coffee, potato chips, and pie. They called it the Speedee Service System, and it was the application of Henry Ford's assembly line principles to a commercial kitchen. The culinary assembly line, the brothers redesigned the kitchen not as a space for cooking, but as a factory floor for production. Spatial engineering. They drew the kitchen layout in chalk on a tennis court and had their employees mime the actions of making burgers. They moved the stations around until the movement was fluid and uninterrupted, eliminating unnecessary steps. The custom dispenser. They realized that the time it took to dress a burger varied by employee. To solve this, they commissioned a local machinist to build a custom sauce gunner-trigger-operated funnel that dispensed a precise dollop of ketchup and mustard in a single shot. This ensured that every burger tasted exactly the same and saved seconds on every assembly. The infrared lamp, instead of cooking to order, they cooked in anticipation of demand. Burgers were grilled and placed under heat lamps, ready to be grabbed the moment a customer reached the window. The result was a burger that went from grill to counter in 30 seconds. By eliminating the car hops and the tipping culture, they could sell the burger for 15 cents, half the price of their competitors. The reopening was initially a failure. Customers drove up, waited for car hops, who never came, and drove away angry. But soon, cab drivers and construction workers discovered the cheap fast food. Families followed, drawn by the lack of rowdy teenagers who hated the self-service model and the low prices. The volume was astronomical. The Speedee system wasn't just a way to make food, it was a way to process humanity. By 1954, the McDonald brothers were famous in restaurant circles, but they were content. They had a beautiful home, Cadillacs, and a business that ran itself. They had franchised a few locations but lacked the drive to conquer the world. Enter Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc was a 52-year-old traveling salesman from Chicago. He had spent his life hustling, playing jazz piano in speakeasies, selling paper cups, and selling Florida real estate. In 1954, he was selling the Prince Castle Multimixer, a machine that could mix 5 milkshakes at once. He was intrigued by an order from San Bernardino for 8 machines. He flew to California to see what kind of hamburger stand needed to make 40 milkshakes simultaneously. Kroc stood in the parking lot and watched the Speedee system in action. He saw the lines of people, the bags of burgers moving across the counter, and the golden arches that Dick McDonald had designed to catch the eye of passing motorists. He didn't just see a restaurant, he saw a machine that printed money. Kroc approached the brothers with a proposition. Let him franchise the system nationwide. The brothers were hesitant. They had tried franchising and hated the headache of quality control. Kroc promised he would handle everything. He signed a contract that gave him the rights to franchise, but crucially gave the McDonald brothers strict control over any changes to the system. The real estate alchemist. Kroc opened his first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1955. He was obsessive about replicating the San Bernardino experience. He personally swept the parking lots and scraped gum off the cement. He mandated that the fries be of a specific thickness and the oil be of a specific temperature. He was building a church of standardization. However, Kroc was not making money. His cut of the franchise fees was small, and the initial contract with the brothers limited his ability to raise royalties. He was drowning in debt. The salvation came from Harry Sonneborn, a financial genius who told Kroc, "You're not in the burger business, you're in the real estate business." Sonneborn devised a scheme where a separate company, Franchise Realty Corp., would lease the land for new restaurants and then sublease it to the franchisee at a markup. This gave Kroc a steady stream of revenue that was independent of burger sales and gave him absolute leverage over the franchisees. If they didn't follow the rules, they lost their lease. The hostile takeover. As Kroc's power grew, his relationship with the McDonald brothers deteriorated. He wanted to change the system. They refused. He wanted to cut costs. They refused. In 1961, Kroc asked their price to sell the company entirely. They demanded $2.7 million, $1 million, for each brother and $700,000 for taxes. Kroc was furious at the price, calling it exorbitant, but he agreed. The final insult came at the closing table. The brothers refused to include the original San Bernardino location in the sale, wanting to give it to the employees. Kroc, enraged, agreed to the deal, but forced them to rename the stand. They called it the Big M. Kroc then opened a brand new McDonald's 1 block away from the Big M. He used his new optimized supply chain to undercut their prices and drive them out of business. Within years, the birthplace of the fast food revolution was shuttered. Ray Kroc erased the founders from their own history, declaring himself the founder in his autobiography, The Colonel's Last Stand. While Kroc was building his empire on real estate and ruthlessness, Harlan Sanders was building his on sheer force of personality. Sanders was a late bloomer in the extreme. He didn't start franchising Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was 65 years old, after a new interstate highway bypassed his original restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky, leaving him broke and living on Social Security. Sanders' innovation was the pressure fryer. Traditional pan frying took 30 minutes too slow for fast food. Deep frying was fast but dried out the meat. Sanders modified a pressure cooker to fry chicken in oil, reducing the cooking time to 9 minutes while locking in the moisture. It was a dangerous manual process, but the result was Sunday dinner quality at fast food speed. Sanders traveled the country in his car, cooking chicken for restaurant owners. If they liked it, they shook hands. His deal was a gentleman's agreement, a nickel for every chicken sold. By 1964, he had 600 franchises. Unlike Kroc, Sanders was a chaotic manager. He kept no books and ran the company from his kitchen table. In 1964, overwhelmed, he sold KFC to a group of investors led by John Y. Brown Jr. for $2 million. But Sanders wouldn't go quietly. He remained the brand ambassador, but he hated the changes the corporation made to his food. He despised the new crispy chicken and famously told a reporter that the new gravy tasted like wallpaper paste and the gravy recipe was pure sludge. The conflict grew so heated that Sanders opened a competing restaurant. Claudia Sanders' Dinner House and KFC sued its own founder for trademark infringement. The image of the elderly colonel in his white suit being sued by the company he created remains a poignant symbol of the tension between craft and commerce. By the 1980s, the operational problems of fast food had been solved. The new battlefield was the human mind. The industry coalesced around a specific aesthetic designed to manipulate consumer behavior. The dominant color palette was red and yellow. Red triggered urgency, excitement, and appetite. It raised the heart rate and encouraged customers to eat quickly and leave, maximizing table turnover. Yellow, associated with happiness, warmth, and high visibility. The golden arches were beacons that could be seen from the highway, long before the restaurant itself. This was the era of the Burger Wars, a period of aggressive comparative advertising that shattered the gentlemanly norms of the industry. The Battle of the Burgers. The war began in earnest in 1982 when Burger King launched a campaign featuring a young Sarah Michelle Gellar. The ads claimed that McDonald's burgers were 20% smaller than Burger King's, and crucially, that McDonald's fried their burgers while Burger King flame-broiled them. It was a direct attack on the quality of the product. McDonald's responded with a lawsuit. The first time a fast food chain had litigated over a commercial, but the decisive blow was struck by the underdog, Wendy's. Founded by Dave Thomas in 1969, Wendy's positioned itself as the old-fashioned alternative. Thomas, an orphan who had worked for KFC before striking out on his own, emphasized fresh, never frozen beef and square patties because Dave never cut corners. In 1984, Wendy's unleashed Clara Peller. Peller was an 83-year-old manicurist, standing 4'10" with a raspy voice and a face full of skepticism. In the commercial, she stares at a competitor's big bun burger, lifts the massive top bun to reveal a pathetic tiny patty, and bellows, "Where's the beef?" The phrase became a cultural supernova. It was used by Walter Mondale in the 1984 Democratic primaries to attack Gary Hart. It was printed on T-shirts, frisbees, and bumper stickers. Wendy's sales jumped 31% that year. However, the ruthlessness of the industry spared no one. When Clara Peller appeared in a commercial for Prego spaghetti sauce saying, "I found it," referring to the beef in the sauce, Wendy's fired her for violating her contract, claiming it implied she found the beef somewhere other than Wendy's. If the 1980s were about domestic warfare, the 1990s were about global conquest. The crowning achievement of this expansion was the opening of McDonald's in Moscow. Negotiations began in 1976 at the Montreal Olympics, where George Cohan of McDonald's Canada lent the Soviet team a Big Mac bus to get around. It took 14 years of diplomatic wrangling to get the deal signed. The Soviet Union was a closed economy. It had no supply chain for iceberg lettuce, russet potatoes, or consistent beef. McDonald's had to build its own McComplex outside Moscow, a massive processing plant, where they taught Soviet farmers how to grow potatoes that wouldn't rot and cattle that had the right fat content. The opening day. On January 31, 1990, the first McDonald's in the Soviet Union opened in Pushkin Square. It was the largest McDonald's in the world at the time, with 900 seats. The reaction was unprecedented. A crowd of 30,000 people lined up. The queue snaked through the park and circled the square 3 times. For Soviet citizens accustomed to shortages, rude service, and gray surroundings, the McDonald's was a sensory shock. The interior was brightly lit. The employees were trained to smile, a behavior so foreign that managers had to teach them to show teeth, and the food was impossibly consistent. The Big Mac cost 3.75 rubles, half a day's wages for the average worker, but people paid it gladly. They didn't just eat the food, they consumed the symbol. Customers were seen carefully washing the styrofoam clamshells and paper cups to take home as souvenirs. displaying them in their apartments like fine china. The opening was a geopolitical marker. It signaled the end of the Cold War as effectively as the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was the moment when the American model of efficiency and consumption became the global standard. Simultaneously in Japan, another American fast food tradition was taking hold, driven by a brilliant piece of myth-making. In the 1970s, Takeshi Okawara, the manager of the first KFC in Japan, struggled to sell fried chicken. Japan had no tradition of Christmas turkey. Okawara, reportedly inspired by a foreigner looking for a turkey substitute, launched a campaign, Kentucky for Christmas. He marketed the party barrel, a bucket of chicken, salad, and cake, as a traditional American Christmas feast. He even dressed Colonel Sanders statues in Santa suits. The campaign filled a cultural void. Without a religious attachment to the holiday, Japanese consumers adopted KFC as the definitive Christmas meal. Today, millions of Japanese families pre-order their Christmas KFC weeks in advance, and the Colonel is as synonymous with the holiday in Japan as Santa Claus. As the industry scaled, the cracks in the facade began to show. The first major crack appeared in London. In 1990, McDonald sued two unemployed activists, Helen Steele and Dave Morris, for libel. The pair had distributed a leaflet titled "What's Wrong with McDonald's?", accusing the company of exploiting workers, destroying rainforests, and targeting children. McDonald's expected the activists to apologize and retreat. Instead, they turned the courtroom into a public tribunal on the fast food industry. Denied legal aid, Steele and Maurice represented themselves against McDonald's top-tier legal team. The McLibel trial became the longest in English legal history, lasting 313 days. While the court ruled in McDonald's favor on some technical points, the judge's verdict was a public relations disaster for the corporation. He ruled that McDonald's did exploit children in its advertising, was culpably responsible for animal cruelty, and was antipathetic to unions. The trial shattered the wholesome, family-friendly image of the brand and exposed the ruthless machinery beneath. The rainforest beef connection, the environmental cost of the industry, also came into focus. In the 1980s, the Rainforest Action Network ran targeted Burger King for importing cheap beef from Central America, where cattle ranching was driving the destruction of the rainforest. The Hamburger Connection campaign forced Burger King to cancel $35 million in contracts in 1987. However, the issue proved persistent. Decades later, investigations revealed that soy used for chicken feed by McDonald's and others was still driving deforestation in the Amazon, highlighting the difficulty of policing a global supply chain, Supersize Me, and the pink slime. The health crisis exploded in 2004, with Morgan Spurlock's documentary, Supersize Me. Spurlock's 30-day diet of nothing but McDonald's resulted in shocking weight gain and liver damage. The film's impact was immediate. McDonald's posted its first ever quarterly loss in 2002-2003, partially due to this growing sentiment, and subsequently discontinued the supersize option. This era also birthed the pink slime controversy. In 2012, ABC News reported on lean, finely textured beef, LFTB, a filler made from beef trimmings treated with ammonia gas to kill bacteria. The substance, used by McDonald's, Taco Bell, and Burger King, was technically safe but aesthetically repulsive. The viral images of the pink paste forced the major chains to abandon the product, proving that, in the internet age, the image of food was as important as the taste. In the 2010s, a new model emerged to challenge the hegemony of the burger giants, fast casual, led by Chipotle. Ironically, once owned by McDonald's, this model offered higher quality food, customization, and crucially an open kitchen. If the Speedee system was about hiding the process to create magic, Chipotle was about revealing the process to create trust. Customers watched their burrito being made. This transparency forced legacy brands to adapt. McDonald's began remodeling its stores in Europe, replacing the garish reds and yellows with muted greens and wood tones, attempting to mimic the Starbucks atmosphere of a third place rather than a factory. The rise and fall of the ghost kitchen. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the shift to delivery, spawning the ghost kitchen restaurants with no seats, existing only on apps. The most spectacular experiment was Mr. Beast Burger. In 2020, YouTuber Mr. Beast launched a burger chain with 300 locations overnight. He didn't build a single restaurant. Instead, he contracted with existing kitchens like Buca di Beppo to cook his burgers as a side hustle. It was the ultimate virtual brand. Initially a smash hit, the model collapsed. Because the cooks worked for other restaurants and had no loyalty to the Mr. Beast brand, quality control was impossible. Customers received raw meat, burnt buns, and unbranded packaging. Mr. Beast eventually sued his partners to shut the brand down. The failure of Mr. Beast Burger proved a century-old lesson. You cannot automate the care out of cooking. The system requires standards, or it crumbles. As we enter the mid-2020s, the industry is circling back to the McDonald brothers' original obsession: speed. But now powered by AI, the drive-thru of 2025 is a surveillance machine. AI ordering voice assistants, Siri for burgers, are replacing human order takers with 99% accuracy and zero patience. Dynamic pricing. Digital menu boards change prices based on the weather, the time of day, and the length of the line. Predictive preparation. Cameras scan approaching cars, identify the license plate, pull up the customer's order history, and tell the kitchen to start cooking their usual before they even speak. Robotics. Automated fry stations and burger flippers are reducing the kitchen staff to mere maintenance workers for the machines. The goal is a frictionless experience. The human element, the car hop on skates, the smiling cashier, the colonel in his white suit is being engineered out of existence. The history of fast food is a loop. It began with the industrialization of the cow, the jungle, and led to the industrialization of the kitchen. White Castle, McDonald's. It stripped away the server's car hops to create speed, then added them back fast, casual, to create trust, and is now stripping them away again, AI, to create efficiency. Throughout this century, the tension remains the same. The conflict between the creator, the Walt Anderson, the Colonel Sanders, the Steve Ells, who cares about the food, and the systematizer, the Billy Ingram, the Ray Kroc, the algorithm who cares about the scale. From the porcelain steel of 1921 to the digital cloud of 2025, the fast food industry remains the ultimate reflection of the modern world, a miracle of logistics, a triumph of marketing, and a complex bargain between convenience and quality that we make, bite by bite, every single day.